summer in country after country, venue after venue. No problem whatsoever. Lovely people turn up, and we have a fantastic day of exchanging information that people wouldn't get, not only in the mainstream media, but great chunks of it anywhere else. So it's all been great. And then before I was due to speak in Manchester 2 weeks ago, out of nowhere came this communication by an organization called Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, headed up by this guy, Stephen Silverman, he calls himself, whoever the hell he is. And they informed the venue, the O2 Apollo in Manchester, that I was a modern day anti-Semitic hate preacher who was going to basically attack Jewish people, and that I was saying that what Hitler did was based on, well, in effect, good reason. It was a shocker, even by the history of such organizations who think it's fine to throw mud in all directions in the hope that it will stick. And what they asked was that people contacted the venue, and pretty much the same happened with Dublin the following week, and complained that they were having this modern day anti-Semitic hate preacher at their theatre. Now, this guy Silverman was not in the audience in Manchester. Sits back in amazement. He's saying that, and he's not in the audience. No. Never let the facts spoil a good story or a good hatchet job to silence someone who's saying things you don't want people to hear. Not that he knows really what I'm saying in the 12-hour talk, because he hadn't seen it. And then you have people sending emails on the back of what he said I'm going to say, complaining that they're having me on because I'm going to say this when I'm not going to say it. Now, this is not just about me. This is very, very important, particularly now, for reasons I'll come to later. So this was Stephen Silverman and the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism saying all this. Now, to their enormous credit, the Apollo in Manchester and the Helix Theatre in Dublin let it go ahead. Of course they did. I've been speaking at O2 venues for decades. They know exactly what I'm saying, and it's nothing like what these idiots. Ooh, getting passionate there. I wonder why. I'll say. So let me show you that, and maybe show them that. Here is an image that I use in the talk. Whoa, that's racist, isn't it? What I'm actually saying in the talks are that we become obsessed with race when what we are is consciousness, awareness, having experiences in different situations, and that whatever color, creed, background our, quote, body is, I'll come more to that in a second, they're just vehicles for experience. And so my philosophy is impossible to equate with racism, because I'm saying that race is irrelevant, and that getting to a point where you judge others by their race, and indeed, just as important, self-define yourself by race, I'm saying those things are ridiculous and incredibly limiting in our perception of self and reality. So here's a clip from the talk where I'm explaining about this infinite awareness of which we're all a part, and its relationship to what we call race.
Near-death experiencer Anita Moorjani, author of a book called Dying to Be Me, said, "When we are not expressing in our physical body, you and I and all of us, we are all expressions of the same consciousness." This is what people experience when they leave the filter of the body, which kind of puts what we call racism into some kind of perspective. We are all the same consciousness. Thus, we are the same consciousness, different color vehicle, end of story. And if people who are involved in racism and self-identifying with race have completely lost the plot of the nature of reality itself, that we are all the same awareness, having different experiences.
And when you listen to that, and then you equate this letter to the Manchester venue, and the fact that a number of venues in Germany have received similar nonsense from other organizations, it's unsupportable. And I go further. In the talk, I'm looking at the nature of physical reality. Because what is race? How do people define race? The genetic structure of the body, which is made up, we're told, of atoms. So there must be such a thing as races in the real world, because you've got different types of bodies made up of different atoms. Of course, atoms are solid, therefore the body must be solid. There's race for you. Except that the body is not solid and atoms are not solid. Atoms have no solidity. And therefore, the whole basis of race, which is a physical body, is an illusion. And here's part of the talk where I'm explaining that.
So this is an atom. Now, atoms make up the physical world. I read it somewhere. They make up the body. Now, there's a nucleus and there are electrons flying around, etc. Now, the distance between the nucleus and the particles within that atom are only as they appear to be on the screen, because I have to get the atom image on the screen. The distances in reality are fantastically greater. Now, let's just deep breath. The atoms are supposed to make up the physical world and the physical body. You know, the body that people are always talking about identifying with their race or attacking someone else's race? That body, you know that one? Well, let's have a look at what it really is. If the nucleus of the atom were the size of a peanut, the atom would be about the size of a baseball stadium. If we lost all the dead space, the non-physical space, quote, inside our atoms, we would each be able to fit into a particle of dust, and the entire human race would fit into the volume of a sugar cube. Now, where was that race thing again? I'm a white supremacist particle of dust, I am. And I'm a Jewish particle of dust. And I'm a Muslim particle of dust. What a nonsense it is. We have race wars, we have racism, we have self-identity with race that defines people's entire life and reality. And they're particles of dust. They're not even that, because if you go deeper to the particle of dust, there'll be no solidity to that either. It's all illusion. And they want to stop me speaking because I'm racist. What? Bloody madness.
And it is bloody madness. When you are saying, in effect, as I am, that physicality doesn't exist, therefore physical race doesn't exist. And these people are saying, I'm a hate preacher preaching racism. And there's something else they do. They ask anybody who was in the audience in Manchester who witnessed the performance to email them describing what happened. What they were expecting, of course, in their stunning levels of ignorance. Oh, he said this and he said that. No. They were inundated with emails from members of the audience. I know that because a lot of them forwarded copies on to us, with people saying, he never said any of that stuff you said he was going to say. He, in fact, said the opposite, talked about love, talked about everything being one consciousness, and that the divisions of labels, including race, are illusory nonsense. So, Mr. Stephen Silverman, are you going to apologize? Now you've been told that what you said I was going to say and tried to stop me speaking as a result is a nonsense. Are you even going to publish the emails from the audience so that people can see what I actually said? And indeed, we've got an audio version of the talk to show that you're talking complete nonsense. And if this was an isolated situation, it would be bad enough, but it's not. This use of anti-Semitism to silence people who are legitimately questioning and investigating aspects of what are called Zionism is going on all over the world and is designed to silence that legitimate investigation and that legitimate exposure. So let me explain what I'm talking about when I challenge the extremes of the regime in Israel and the inner circle of the Zionist movement. First of all, Zionism is not about race. It's a political philosophy. It's a political movement. And there are many, many Jewish people all over the world who fiercely, vehemently oppose Zionism. Then there are great swathes of Jewish people in the world who support Zionism as support for the existence of Israel and for the way they perceive Zionism to be. What I'm saying, however, is that there is a cabal at the center of Zionism, not least connected to the House of Rothschild, that is in effect, more than in effect, a secret society. And it's that secret society, not everyone else, it's that core secret society that is manipulating within the wider web of manipulation, and that needs to be legitimately investigated. You know, when, for instance, you have the chairman of the US Federal Reserve, the privately owned Central Bank of America, going back to Reagan Bush, everyone since then, Alan Greenspan, Bernard Bernanke, Janet Yellen, have been Zionists, right up to present day, where Janet Yellen is chairman of the Federal Reserve and Stanley Fischer is vice chairman. He used to be head of the Bank of Israel. Now, when you think that the entire Jewish population of America is 2%, then take away all these, the great majority of the Jewish population who are either opposing Zionism or don't really appreciate what it is at its core. And what you're left with is a tiny few people from the secret society level that have an extraordinary ratio in terms of positions of influence and power. Now that is legitimate journalistic investigation. If that was the case with Chinese people heading the Federal Reserve, president after president, party after party, decade after decade, or Hispanic people, or any other people and identifiable group, people would legitimately, even mainstream media probably, would say, hold on a minute, what's going on here? So why is it different when there's a common theme of Zionism? Why have Zionists had such influence in the Treasury Department of the United States, right up to present day with Trump? Why is it that the leader of Israel, which I say is the fiefdom of the Rothschilds, and Israelis are just being used as a, if you like, something to hide that behind. Why does someone like Benjamin Netanyahu have so much influence, have such a voice on the world stage, when he is the leader of 8 million people in a world of 7.4 billion? These are legitimate questions that any journalist worth the name would be asking. And if there are fair enough answers to it, then fair enough. But to say they can't be highlighted and can't be asked simply because groups of people systematically hurl anti-Semite at you whenever you question the actions of Zionism, not least in relation to Palestinians, and the actions of the Israeli government. But they seem to believe that they should, unlike everybody else, be immune to criticism and questioning. And this whole anti-Semitic network of accusers has actually been built up decade after decade after decade, not to protect Jewish people from prejudice. I condemn prejudice of any kind. It's another, when you come from the point of view that we're all one consciousness, prejudice of any kind on the basis of religion, race, whatever. is not just horrible, it's ridiculous. And the confirmation of ignorance about the nature of reality itself. But that's not what much of this "he's an anti-Semite, she's an anti-Semite" network globally is all about. It's about silencing legitimate investigation and questioning of the actions, behavior, and goals of the Zionist secret society. And even this whole thing, anti-Semitism, is a complete nonsense, in the sense that what is Semitic? What does it mean? Semitic describes a series of language groups, primarily in North Africa and the Middle East. Going back a long, long time, the Phoenicians were Semites in the Semite language group. And the vast, overwhelming majority of people who speak one of the Semitic languages today are those that speak, irony of irony, Arabic. Even the very term, even the very label, is based on a complete misunderstanding. But this is the whole foundation of it. It's to turn anti-Semite into a term of abuse, and then hurl it in all directions at those people who are questioning the actions of Zionism. And here's a question. Why do people who say they're anti-hate behave with so much hatred? Why are people who say they're anti-racist so utterly obsessed with race? They see it everywhere. They self-identify with it. And they hurl then the term racist at people like me who are saying, actually, all of us, Arab, Jew, as we use the labels, middle-class Americans, Danish, South African, black, white, we're all the same consciousness having different experiences. You couldn't make it up, but you don't have to, because they do. And we have an organization like operating out of America and globally that calls itself the Anti-Defamation League. You know what it does? It goes around defaming people. In the same way we have anti-haters going out hurling hate at people. And anti-racists obsessed with race. And it's particularly important now for reasons of Donald Trump. I'm going to come to that in a second, but there's another couple of stories this week that kind of support what I'm saying here. This is one. Israel conference called off for security reasons after complaints from Jewish community. An academic conference to discuss the legitimacy of Israel has been postponed by an Irish university citing security reasons. What, there were threats of violence if it went ahead? Is that what that means? After complaints from the Jewish community labeling it a biased anti-Israel event. If it was an anti-American event, an anti-British event, even an anti-Irish event, no problem. So what's with the special treatment wherever you look? This is a legitimate question a journalist should be asking. The seminar was due to convene at University College Cork in March, but has been called off due to, quote, inadequate security infrastructure and staffing, amid reports of planned protests at the event. Anyone remember free speech? You must be getting on there. The conference was entitled International Law and the State of Israel, Legitimacy, Responsibility and Exceptionalism. This is the second time the conference has been pulled due to security reasons. In 2015, the University of Southampton cancelled the event, citing similar reasons. However, members of the Irish for Israel organisation who contacted the Cork University asking them to cancel the event have claimed the move as a win. Oh, free discussion, free expression has been deleted. Whoa! Result. Stand With Us Israel spearheaded the email campaign to the president of the university, describing the conference as, quote, another example of shameful hatred and discrimination masquerading as an academic conference. Again, hateful, hatred. You question Israel, you've got to be hateful. It's cause and effect, apparently. The group claimed the conference, quote, deliberately shuts out voices of those it doesn't agree with and seeks to push an hateful agenda. Hateful again. Now, I did just read that, didn't I? Let me do that again. The group claimed the conference deliberately shuts out voices of those it doesn't agree with, like Zionist organizations are doing to people all over the world whenever they challenge Israel. The hypocrisy is a shocker. Following the cancellation of the event, the University of Southampton organisers unsuccessfully challenged the decision in the High Court to be stopped from speaking in the Southampton University, and since then it has had difficulty securing a host for the conference, of course, because the hosts get contacted. They don't want the hassle. They've got backbones of jelly. They care more about their own personal situation than they do about freedom of speech, and so this is why these people can't have their discussion. But if it was a discussion about Israel in the opposite terms to what was being or planned to be discussed there, not a problem. And this is why what I'm talking about here is important. Because Donald Trump is the most vehemently pro-Israel, Israel right or wrong, president since Israel was created. They are going to be allowed to do basically whatever they like without resistance from the United States. And we're already seeing it, and they know that's the case. We have had, since Trump was elected, never mind, inaugurated, announcements of more and more building of Israeli settlements, thousands and thousands of buildings in occupied Palestinian land in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And we are seeing Israel, its leaders, becoming more and more belligerent and up yours since Trump won the election. This is the Prime Minister Netanyahu this week. Israel PM, new settlements, just a taste of things to come in Trump era. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that the latest settlement approval is just a taste of the new measures, which will be taken now that Barack Obama is no longer US president. Quote, we are leaving the period. The building approval was a taste. We are going to be doing many things differently from now on. said Netanyahu while addressing the Israeli parliament on Wednesday. The Israeli approval for these new settlements came 2 days after a phone conversation between Trump and Netanyahu in which regional issues were discussed, and the Israeli Prime Minister was invited to Washington in February. Despite recent resolutions against the illegal settlements, the United Nations Security Council refrained from taking any measures against the move following a closed-door meeting held on Wednesday. And the resolution that went through condemning these Israeli settlements in Palestinian-occupied land only went through in the last breaths of the Obama regime because for the first time the United States abstained and didn't veto such a resolution. I think you can safely say, now Trump's in, that that's the last time that will happen. And then there is this guy this week, Israeli Defense Minister, this guy Lieberman. Army will go full force in future wars. Collapsing EU shouldn't lecture Israeli defense chief. And he said, again in this Trump era, that the army, the Israeli army, will stop at nothing to defeat the enemy in conflicts to come, and they won't stop until the adversary waves a white flag. He also slammed attempts by third parties to what he called meddle. Speaking at a 2-day security conference in Tel Aviv, Lieberman, a longtime ally of Netanyahu, said that the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, will fight till the bitter end and not settle for half measures. It doesn't matter, he said, where the next conflict breaks out. It has to be at full strength. You recruit the entire army, the entire reserves. You go full strength until the end, until the other side raises the white flag. We will not stop in the middle. If a quarter of the strip is needed, then we occupy a quarter of the strip. If more, then more. And this is why understanding why this label of anti-Semite is thrown around like confetti, why it's done and why it's being done now. Because things are going to happen through Israel, thanks to Trump, that are going to need to be exposed. And the Palestinians, who are just starting the next nightmare, quite possibly their worst nightmare, now Trump's in, are going to need the support of people around the world. And if we bow to intimidation, if progressives buy the nonsense put out by these organizations, then we are going to concede the right to publicly challenge the behavior of Israel and expose its agenda. And that must not happen. We need some backbone here out of sheer decency. And so, Mr. Stephen Silverman, publish the emails from the audience in Manchester. Apologize for the grotesque misrepresentation of what I am saying in these talks. And to everyone else, yes, there are people who are racially anti-Jewish. There are people who are racially anti-Muslim, racially anti-black.